All right, this was maybe Emily Dickinson's "I Felt a Funeral in My Brain." Otherwise known as really number 280, but that's what almost all of us know it as. Is "I Felt a Funeral in My Brain." Uh, and a lot, I'll read it and then I will give my little lecture here on it. Um, I felt a funeral in my brain and mourners to and fro, kept treading till it seemed that sense was breaking through. And when they all were seated, a service like a drum kept beating till I felt my mind was going numb. And then I heard them lift the box and creak across my soul with those same boots of lead again, and then space began to toll, as all the heavens were a bell and being but an ear, and I and silence some strange race wrecked solitary here, and then a plank and reason broke, and I dropped down and hit a world at every plunge and finished knowing then. Okay. Um, again, this is going to be a very kind of elusive poem, hard to completely pin down, what the deeper meaning or what even maybe the literal meaning of this is, because it starts out, that first line, I felt a funeral in my brain. There is a theory out there that this is simply about a migraine headache. By the way, which I can see that. It actually kind of works. I wonder if I wouldn't think that you know, the great Emily Dickinson, I think, must be reaching for something a little, beyond that. But who knows? Maybe that's what inspired it. But again, I felt a funeral in my brain, and mourners to and fro kept treading till it seemed that sense was breaking through. And again, she uses sounds a lot in this poem, right? She felt the funeral in her brain, and again, mourners to and fro, then kept treading till it seemed that sense was breaking through. And again, that tread, those two T's, those hard sounds, right? Just doosh, doosh. I mean, it really does almost feel like the throbbing in the head. Or, again, this is kind of how we get ideas, things too. We're struggling to come up with something. We're struggling. If you ever try to write something or create something, and whatever, there's something sort of shimmering on the horizon in your mental sky somewhere, right? And you just cannot, you can't fucking get it. You can't grasp it. But then you go outside, you just take a walk or you take a long shower, and bam, and then boom. It's like it was magic. But it wasn't, by the way, right? The back of your mind was just sort of cooking away at that, and then it finally, popped. When you need it, what it is you needed to stop stressing on it and then applying the pressure to try to drive this thing out. And when you did, it just sort of mulched and sort of formed, and like almost as like life in a petri dish or something, and then finally sprouted, right? That could be something like that's going here on here. But again, all the imagery here is funereal. All right, so it's all death imagery, and again the mourners to and fro, and then the treading is it, and we'll see that repeated beating in the next stanza too, right? But then again, but odd to end that with as if sense was breaking through. And the second stanza, when they all were seated, a service like a drum kept beating till I thought my mind was going numb. And again, and imagining a church service, right, as a drum, beating like a drum. Boy, that is something. And that can be, boy, if you've ever had to sit through a mass, you didn't feel like, I'm sorry, I was raised Catholic, that you didn't feel like sitting through. It can seem maybe a little bit like that, but also if you're in pain, it can seem a bit. If you're at a funeral for somebody you've loved, and especially if you're say it's a parent or somebody close, right? A parent or God forbid a child or or a spouse, someone immediate, and you feel like everyone's kind of looking at you and you kind of want to just be alone. It can seem a little bit like that here too. So again, there is a sense. I mean, there's such a feeling of solitariness throughout this entire poem, but there's also, a sense of the craving for solitude, and the sort of unsubstantiated, I guess, or not unsubstantiated, the unrealized desire, for lonesomeness, at the same time, in this. And again, a service like a drum. And again, yeah, service beating like a drum is a stunning imagery, and completely original. I've never heard anyone else use a term like this. But again, it kept beating, beating till I felt my mind was going numb. And again, that is also what trauma does to us. But I guess also again, what a serious physical pain could also do to us. But I think also you know grief can do to us. So there's a lot of there seems to be a fair amount of surface area of interpretation to land on. As they're often, Dickinson's poems are often elliptic, and often it seems like there's a lot of entry and entrances and exits you can kind of take to interpret her work. Um, and then I heard them lift a box and creak across my soul with those same boots of lead again. Then space began to toll, and now we're getting, really sort of strange. And again, lift the box. Obviously, that's the casket. I don't think that one's so hard to figure out. But creak across my. She lifted a box, which is the funeral. And again, this funeral is completely in her brain. It's not an actual funeral, right? But then creak across her soul. Again, with just another just shocking, amazing image. If you're really open to the poem, you are feeling something deep, I think, there that you cannot maybe even completely articulate and hear the way I'm struggling here, trying to do it. And then boots of lead again. Then space began to toll. And again, then space being brought into it. And again, this is maybe the shuffling off of the mortal coil, and the end, the exit of the living and into this sort of immaterial, fathomless realm of the unknown, I guess, is the best I can kind of grasp onto there. But again, she specifies it as space, which again is I think the first thing any of us think of when we think of space, especially if we're imagining ourselves in space, is that it's like the ultimate sort of nightmare where there's no gravity and you just sort of spin and drift into endless nothingness, right? But again, there's something. Space itself, it's the nothingness itself that's beginning to toll. And she's again, that's a very common topic. Tactic of Dickinson to take the extreme abstract and concretizing it by giving it concrete features like that. Like space can't toll, but it can in Dickinson's imagination. The penultimate sort of stanza here: as all the as all the heavens were a bell, and being but an ear, and I in silence some strange race wrecked solitary here. And again, as if all the heavens were a bell. And again, that's just such an unexpected way to imagine the heavens. And again, heavens here, again, she's using the word on purpose. So I do think she's bringing in the Christian heaven as a connotation, but only a connotation there. And also, heavens can obviously be all the sky, the sky and the space above it, and our atmosphere and whatever's beyond it. But again, as if they were all a bell and being were but an ear. And wow, I just she maybe had some magic mushrooms and tripping her brains out or something. Anyway, but also this sort of that's actually not a bad maybe thought. If you've had that experience, that is the common people who have psychedelic. LSD trips and things like that, right? Is that there it tends to induce a kind of oneness with everything. And again, the heavens now, which is the everything, the literal everything, right? I mean, the earth is seated in the heaven. It's almost like an atom, as a part, the same way an atom is a part of, or a molecule is a part of your body. The earth is like that for the heavens or something, right? That and your one's entire being becoming only an ear, which is just again absorbing, the frequency and the sounds of heaven itself. And again, the ears are where we hear the sounds, and then the brain, which is where this the funeral is taking place, is where we then interpret those sounds, right? So there does seem to be this sort of a strange and eerie kind of personification of human perception itself in some way. But again, racked solitary here, and it's always back to the solitary with Dickinson. And she's, again, this is, at the end, we are all alone. And we live our lives that way too. We're all trapped in our own skull casings, right? And the last stanza, and then a plank and reason broke, and I dropped down and hit a world at every plunge and finished knowing then. And again, it's just leaving if you're trying to interpret this poem, maybe leaving you flailing a little bit that much more. But I think the plank and reason breaking is another it's about the fourth or fifth one here. Just startling images now to quickly go through them. Everything from mourners to and fro, scents breaking through, surface being like a drum. And creaking across one's soul, heavens being a bell, being an ear, and now the plank and reason breaking, and that is kind of what it's like. And again, that can also be what we brought up earlier with the sort of when you're trying to think of something, and the same thing as if trying to remember someone's name and you can't remember. And then again later when you're not thinking about it, your brain kind of keeps mulching on that in the background, and the wheels keep spinning, and you don't even really realize it. It's the same part of your brain, I guess, as beating your heart and blinking your eyes and everything else, and some boom, then the name just pops into your mind. So the plank and reason breaking can be a little bit like that, but I think this is more like the letting go and the maybe the dying itself, and again dropping down and down, and hitting a world at every plunge. And again, that could be the sort of the maybe similar to that last the because I could not stop for death poem, right, where she the passing of one's life at the very end, but then and finished knowing then, and again all the burden of the human condition, which is to be constantly trying to analyze things and weigh things and figure things out. Everything from, what does this person I love really think of me, to, how does the molecular structure of a human being actually operate and work, right? And so that's all done, man, and all her cares are done, and there is something fun coming to a close here, at long last in this last at the end, excuse me, of I felt a funeral in my brain. Okay, see you next time.